now let's move on to hands-on 5, looping and branching. So in this week, we'll learn about the conditional statements and loopings. For conditional statements, we have if-else statements and case statements. And for loops, we'll learn about while, until, and for loops. And I'll explain each of them in the next slides. So for conditional statements, let's start with the first one, if-else statement. So if-else statement, you can think of it as if we're talk normally in life, say if today the weather is sunny, I'll go to the park, else if it's snowing, I will go skiing, or else I'll just stay home. And it is the same way in programming. So if you see the diagram here, there's a condition which is refer back to my example, it could be the condition of the weather. And if the condition is true, then it goes to this block of code. If it's false, then it goes to this block of code, and then it executes the results of either the option. So in the hands-on, you'll see this piece of code. Basically, what this program does is it's going to print out a line on your terminal saying how many pizzas do you want to buy. And then the user gonna be able to enter an input, and that input is going to be stored into this amount variable, and from there this amount variable will be passed on into the if-else blocks. And so if the amount they enter is less than 0, then they will see a message back on the screen saying please enter a number that is greater than 0. If the amount they enter is greater than 10, they will see this result, sorry, we do not have that many pizzas, and they'll exit this if-else statement. And last option, if the amount they enter is not smaller than 0 and also not greater than 10, then they will see, there you go, here are the number of pizza for you. And notice that the if-else statement in bash scripting, it starts with an if and it ends with an fi. And then the next statement is going to be the case statement. So case, it's basically the similar concept to if and else, but people tend to use case when there are a lot of if-else statements. Then case will make your program look nicer, cleaner, easier to read. So this piece of code from the hands-on practice, basically what it does is it will take in a user input, and it will be stored in this $1, and then this line, it will examine the first character of the input, and if that first character is not between 0 and 9, they're gonna receive this message, non-numeric characters. Otherwise, they will receive this is a number. And then that message will be passed on into this printf function that will print on the screen. So say for example, if my input is 10, then 10 will be passed into this $1, and let me write down here, let's say my input equals to 10, then what this case does, that it will examine the first character, which is 1. And if 1 it's not between 0 and 9, then it will go to the second statement, right? So I will expect to see you enter a number. What if I enter my input as AA? Then same thing will examine the first character. It will look at A, so A, it's not between 0 and 9, which is, it falls into this first condition, then it will execute this non-numeric character. So try it out and it will give you a better understanding. And again, the case statement starts with case and ends with ESAC. And now moving on to looping. Let's say first thing is the while loop. For the while loop, this is how it works. There's a condition, and as long as that condition is true, the code or the loop will keep being executed over and over and over until that condition is no longer true. Then the while loop will be exited. So in this hands-on practice, here's the while loop code. We have a number n that has the value of 1, and while the condition, which is in this square brackets, while n, the value of n, which right now is 1, less than or equal to, in bash scripting it is LE. So if the value of n is less than or equal to whatever the input that the user put in, then print this line. And after you print the line, you plus 1 to the value of n. So let's say the first time I have n equals 1, so 1 is still, and then I have the input. Let's say my input equals 5. And so first time n is 1, and it's going to go into this block, it's going to examine the condition, and n, which is 1, is less than or equals to 5, right? So on the screen I will see that the loop has already run 1 time. And then now it's going to plus 1 to n, so it's going to be 2. So it will go back up here, and 2 is still less than or equal to 5, so it will go back in here and run the code, and then it will plus 1, so now my n is 3, and it will keep going until my n is greater than 5. Then it will exit out of the while loop. And then until loop. Until loop is basically the opposite of while loop. So for while loop, as long as the condition is true, then the loop will run. But for the until loop, as long as the condition is false, then the loop will keep running. So how does it look like? Here's the code. Say we have n equals to 1, and until the value of n is greater than the input that the user gives, keep executing this block of code. And then last thing, for loop. We use for loop to iterate through a list of things. So for example, look at this piece of code. For name in Kevin, author, Evan. So name here, it stands for each element in this string, or this list of string, which is Evan, author, and Kevin, author, and Evan. So as for each element, it will be passed into this printf function, and it will print out that element. So say with this block of for loop, I would expect on my screen to see Kevin, author, and Evan printed separately. And for the second for loop, we start counting from 0, and then as long as the value of I is less than 10, then I will keep printing out this line. And after I print it, each time I print, I will plus 1 to the value of I. So let's say the first time I have I equals 0, and it will print, the loop runs 0 times, and then it will go back and it will plus 1 to I. So I right now is 1, and then it'll go back in here. So I is 1 and it's still smaller than 10, so it will keep executing the code until I is greater than 10. So it's the condition in this for loop is no longer correct, then your for loop will be exited. And basically that's it for this hands-on. Try it out, write the code, and run it by yourself. And if you have any question, here's my contact again, and see you next week.